Welcome to this week's edition of New York Now. I'm Dan Clark. We now know Governor Cuomo's plan to fix the state's economy, which has taken a beating during the COVID-19 pandemic. Cuomo released his proposal for the state budget this week, coming in at a price tag of $193 billion. That plan includes a strategy for filling the state's massive budget gap, and then some. And he said it's all going to depend on how much money New York gets from the federal government, which we might not know for a few months. In the meantime, he's presenting two scenarios for the future of New York's finances, one that's good and one that's not so good. Take a look. It was a tale of two states, a New York in peril and a New York made whole. That was Governor Cuomo's message this week when he unveiled his plan to fill a projected $15 billion budget deficit over 2 years.
So we're asking for fairness from Washington.
Cuomo laid out two very different strategies for curing the state's finances, both of which depend on billions of dollars in aid from the federal government. He blamed former President Donald Trump for the COVID-19 pandemic and said it's only fair the federal government foots the bill.
What happened on COVID last spring was a result of federal negligence. What happened to New York was no fault of New Yorkers.
The best case scenario, Cuomo said, would be for the federal government to send the full $15 billion to New York. That would fill the state's budget gap and allow the state to avoid billions of dollars in spending cuts and tax hikes. That money could also be used to provide tax credits for restaurants and small businesses, which have been hit especially hard by the state's COVID-19 shutdowns.
Restaurants paid a really high price for what happened during COVID. Many businesses were hurt.
It's not unlikely that New York would receive the full $15 billion it's asking for. President Joe Biden is proposing a new stimulus package that would provide billions in aid for state and local governments. But if they don't come through with the full $15 billion, Cuomo says, New York will sue the Biden administration in pursuit of those funds.
The new government didn't cause the damage, but they are legally, ethically, and politically responsible for correcting it.
It would be the first time Cuomo goes toe-to-toe with President Biden, a close ally, and he says he's willing to do it because the alternative would be financial chaos for New York.
If the federal government doesn't fund state and local governments, it's going to hurt all New Yorkers.
That's Cuomo's second plan for closing the state's budget gap. In that scenario, he's banking on at least $6 billion in federal aid. That would leave a $9 billion gap that Cuomo says would be closed through tax hikes on the rich, a delay in tax cuts for the middle class, and massive spending cuts.
You then have to cut dramatically.
And Cuomo, again, said he'd prefer to not raise taxes on the rich in New York, saying that wouldn't raise enough money to avoid cuts in spending. Leaders from the state legislature took a different position, saying Democrats should be ready and willing to raise revenue from the state's wealthiest residents. In a statement, Senate Majority Leader Andrea Stewart-Cousins said the state, quote, must be ready to act as a state to advance efforts to raise revenues, including having the hyper-wealthy share this burden. Republicans in the state legislature feel differently. They want Cuomo and Democrats who control the state legislature to take another look at spending to see if there's anywhere the state could reduce costs without raising taxes. Senator Tom O'Mara is the top-ranking Republican on the Senate Finance Committee.
New York continues to spend too much and tax too much.
Cuomo also wants Congress to repeal a cap installed during the Trump era on the deductibility of state and local taxes. For New Yorkers that itemize, that would put more money in their pocket, he said.
That increases our taxes every year. If it's dropped, our taxes will go down every year.
And he's also seeking to legalize both adult use marijuana and mobile sports betting this year, saying the two industries could generate more than $800 million for the state annually. Democrats in the legislature will now come up with their own spending plan and hash it out with Cuomo behind closed doors. The state budget is due at the end of March. So you can imagine it's going to be a very interesting next few months. With me in studio to discuss are John Campbell from the USA Today Network and Keisha Kuki from Bloomberg. Thank you both for being here.
Thanks for having us.
So John, I want to start with you. This is a budget plan. We have two budget plans, a $6 billion if we get it from the federal government, a $15 billion if we get it from the federal government. What have we heard from reaction from lawmakers first is what I want to get from you.
You know, the number one reaction we've heard from lawmakers so far is they want the Democratic lawmakers, I should say, they want a higher tax on the wealthy regardless of how much money comes from the federal government. Whereas the governor's plan, which, you know, he painted it as two different plans. Really, it's one plan with some asterisks, really. It says if we get more money from the federal government, you know, we won't have to increase taxes on the wealthy. We won't have to do this. We won't have to do that. But the Democratic lawmakers are really making clear that they want to use this opportunity to increase taxes on the wealthy. Some are not pleased with the governor's plan as it is, which would increase taxes on people making over $100 million by 2 percentage points. People making more than $5 million, the income would be taxed about half a percentage point more. It's a sliding scale. So you're seeing some reaction from lawmakers that they want to do the millionaire's tax regardless of how much money comes from the federal government.
And I should say later in the show, we'll be talking to State Senator Jabari Brisport about this proposal. They have a whole package of bills, a whole smorgasbord of, you know, billions of dollars of revenue raisers. So stay tuned for that. Keisha, I want to go to you next. So what surprised me about this budget plan is the governor has these two plans. Both of them rely on aid from the federal government. But what we're not hearing is a situation where we don't get any money from the federal government by the time the budget is due, which is the end of March.
I think that the governor, throughout the coronavirus pandemic and throughout the fall, people kept saying, we have a deficit this year. I mean, the current fiscal year, let alone next year's budget, we still have a deficit. How are you going to fill it? And continuously, he's waiting on the federal government. So he's kind of, I mean, I don't know what happens if we don't get anything. They kind of seem to think that we're going to get some sort of aid, and it just is a matter of how much and whether or not it's going to be just a really tough budget. It's has a proposal to pause middle class income tax reductions this year, which is something that lawmakers would want to do because it makes them look good in their districts to have tax cuts. Major cuts to education, healthcare, and this is a time of crisis, and so making cuts would only make it worse. So I think he's just really betting on Biden.
Right.
There's also, I mean, there's a caveat built into the budget that says if the state doesn't get $3 billion from the feds by August, then the budget director, Cuomo's budget director, can withhold certain payments to local governments. Not school aid. School aid is an exception to that. But you know, that suggests to me that they are anticipating that maybe they'll pass this budget with these unknowns still, just like they did last year. And give the opportunity to the budget director to withhold funding if they don't get that federal money.
Which I gotta say, I wouldn't be surprised if even if they did get $15 billion from the federal government, if they still put something in the budget that said, by the way, if this $15 billion doesn't quite work out, we're still gonna give power to the budget director to make cuts as he or she sees fit at the time.
Well, and that's always a struggle between the legislature and the governor. How much is the legislature willing to give up in terms of power and authority? And how much does the governor want? I mean, the governor always wants all of it, quite frankly. So that, I mean, that's going to be something that's going to be hashed out over the next few months of negotiations.
And we should mention, so Keisha or John, whichever one of you wants to answer this, things look a little better than they projected them to be in the spring, right?
Yeah, originally I think it was a $14.9 billion deficit just for the current fiscal year, $16 billion for the next fiscal year, which starts April 1st. And it's kind of interesting because some of the fiscally conservative lobby groups and political analysts have been saying all along that Cuomo's kind of crying wolf, like making it look worse than it actually is, and not taking into consideration certain revenues that are going to come in, federal aid that could close that gap. Well, the budget proposal comes out, and oh, guess what? We only have $4.7 billion for the current fiscal year, and then another 10, so it works out to about $15 billion total. So that $15 billion budget gap is for both years, and it's presumed that we can fill this year already with a mixture of cuts that the administration has already made, for freezes on pay hikes, and federal aid.
And if we don't get the $15 billion, as we mentioned before this segment, the state is going to sue the Biden administration. I think this is a really interesting situation for the state to be in, John, because President Biden is a very close ally of the governor's. There were points where we thought that the governor was going to go to his administration and be part of the cabinet. What does that look like politically? Do you think the governor would actually move forward with that?
I mean, it's, you know, it's easy to threaten to sue somebody, you know,
Right.
and you can file any lawsuit you want, but whether that lawsuit has actual legal bearing is another question. We've seen a similar kind of lawsuit the state filed against the federal government when Donald Trump was in charge about the state and local tax deductions that were rescinded essentially or capped during the 2017 federal tax reform. So, and they made an equal protection claim, basically saying that it's not protecting states equally under the law. I don't know exactly what the legal rationale would be. I mean, as of right now, it's just a little tidbit that the governor threw out that garnered some headlines, but there's not any meat to it. So who knows what that would be.
Right, they lost the SALT lawsuit because the judge said at the time that even though this did hurt people in New York, it was still the purview of the federal government to do this. They had every right to do it. It was not illegal.
And why would it be any different now?
Right,
with
that's
that
what I'm
lawsuit?
thinking.
Yeah, exactly.
So moving forward, before we run out of time, Keisha, we have a new president this week, President Biden, as I said, close ally of Andrew Cuomo. How is this going to change the relationship between New York and the federal government? I have to assume things will get better between the Cuomo administration and who's in the White House.
Yeah, I think Cuomo has continuously said that the Trump administration had, I think it was, used New York State as a political piñata. And there were multiple things. I mean, everything from immigration issues to taxes, as John had said, was kind of against New York State and against blue states in general. So having, pardon me, having a Democratic president will theoretically be a boon to the blue states, but also we have Chuck Schumer as the majority leader in the Senate, and that also could be big money for New York State because typically they try to funnel that money to their home state, just a little extra on the side.
Yeah, well, we'll see. That'll be really interesting to watch in the next few weeks. John Campbell from the USA Today Network and Keisha Kluge from Bloomberg, thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.